even people in the 19th century lived their lives in colour. Their eyes were in colour, their hair was in colour, their world was in colour. What was not in colour, at least from 1841, was photographic evidence of those lives. Here's an image of Miss Ginny Burton. It's taken in 1863, and she's in her 80s. It's from Shinrone in County Offaly. Now, Ginny, when she saw artwork, when she saw landscapes, they certainly weren't in black and white. And this might seem obvious to us today, but we have had one Old Ireland in Colour reader say to us that their grandson asked them, "Granny, do you remember the world when it was in black and white?" Now, I'm a historian, John's an engineer, and we're here because we really believe that viewing history through the lens of colour can democratise history and engage more people than ever before. So I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, but first John's going to talk about the how, and we feel that images are really important to this, so they're going to be on show for the next while.
Colorization is not a new process. Colorization has actually been in existence for over 180 years, and it goes right back to the very dawn of photography, to 1841. And there are records of a Swiss painter and lithographer whose name was Issenring, and he basically took powdered dyes, and using brushes and gum, he applied those dyes to the old daguerreotype photographs of the time. And the demand for colorization just exploded after that. Everybody wanted to have photos in color. Family portraits, the tourist industry was a huge market for colorized photographs. People going to Japan wanted to have mementos of their visits in color. And also for the emigrant market. If you think about it, at the time, it was very expensive to travel places. People wanted to see home in color, and therefore colorized photographs became very, very popular. And I think for family photographs in particular, there was a real democratization of color pictures of families because, again, up until that point in time, it was only the really wealthy who could afford to have their paintings done in color. They would sit down for days or for weeks, and somebody would come in and paint their picture, and of course it was quite expensive. So when photography came out, and then colorization, the middle class and the working class were able to go into photo studios and get this picture in color of their family. So if we fast forward now to the present, we can take these kind of manual colorization techniques and we can combine them with computer-aided technologies to produce what we believe is a much richer and more realistic colorization. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So here's a picture. It's from Galway. It's the Galway fish market, a Spanish arch in the background, some of you may recognize. And it's a very happy scene with people dancing and singing and, of course, buying and selling fish as well. And this is it transformed into color using the techniques we've talked about. So it really brings the scene to life. You kind of feel more like you're there in touch with the people in the photograph. And I mentioned family photos, and this is a nice picture that's coming up of a photo from Roscommon. It's a family scene, the parents and their kids. And again, there is a slight disconnect with the black and white picture, but when you see it in color, it does really allow you to become more connected to the people in the picture. So we use some systems. There's one system called Deoldify, which kind of does what the name suggests, and another system called Palette. And they provide a kind of a base layer, a colorization layer, that then we bring into Photoshop. And we carry out extensive manual colorization on that photograph. And it really, it takes a lot of research because you're trying to find out any known eye colors, hair colors, maybe the clothes that people wore, the types of dyes that were used at a point in time, building materials, the color of roof slates or chimney pots, all this kind of stuff. So it takes a lot of research, but it definitely is worth it, and it produces what we think is a kind of a state-of-the-art in terms of colorization, a much more realistic and deeper connection to these people in the photograph.
So one of my jobs as a historian is to make people care about how the world has changed, how it has progressed. And much as our teachers might have taught us it was all about memorizing dates, it's not, trust me. And one of the ways that I find that people care is when we consider life stories, the human. That's a big part of us developing some empathy with the people that we're viewing. Now, we're coming out of a decade of acknowledging the foundation of the Irish Free State. And as a result of this, there's a lot of individuals that we've learnt about and we've seen a number of times. And when I see them in black and white, of course I recognise them. My students recognise them. But if they're scrolling through Instagram, are they going to stop and explore more about those individuals if they're in black and white? Will they learn that Constance Markievicz was the first female MP elected to Parliament, that Maud Gonne was certainly more than the love interest of W.B. Yeats? She was a political activist, an advanced nationalist. Or that the history, and particularly the modern political history of Ireland, is certainly more than the Collins-De Valera split. No, what I have found through this project is they won't. Colorisation is a tool that is engaging more people than any other project I've been involved in. And I'm just going to give a tangible example of the past and the present. So our most recent book cover, it's a fairly typical harvest scene in Cork in 1947. And when we released it, and when the publishers released it, they received an email from a woman, Siobhan O'Connor. And she said that she thought her father was the boy with the bucket in the image. And it turned out it was. It was Kevin O'Connor, it was his brother Paddy, and it was his parents. And all Siobhan wanted was a copy of the image. But luckily we did that. But Kevin, his wife, Siobhan, and her partner, they actually came to Galway. Kevin lives in Birmingham. And at almost 80 years of age, Kevin wondered what all the fuss was about, but he got to see us launch the book, and thankfully he was really happy. So that to me is such a tangible connection of the past and the present.
The connection can be quite local, as you've heard with the story of Kevin O'Connor, and quite personal too. You know, this is Wilton in Cork and Kevin O'Connor connecting us to his story and to this photograph. And it's just been amazing to hear about all of the relatives and the people who've spotted their ancestors in the photographs we've colorized, in the books and so on. In one of those small Irish world stories, my friend Mary had sent a copy of the book to her brother in New York, and he had shared a photo of a copy of the book on his bookshelf on Facebook. And then a friend of his saw the picture on Facebook and texted him and said, "Oh my God, that's my mother on the cover." And I do think that seeing your ancestor in colour just really has quite a profound effect. When I started colorizing photographs originally, I was also doing some genealogical research into my own family tree. And I had various photographs of my grandparents from Fanor in County Clare and from Glenties in County Donegal that I was trying to colorize. And the next picture I'm going to show you is one of my, and I have to say this always, my great, I know you have to use the fingers, my great grandmother. Her name was Bridget Nealon Collins. She was born in 1849, so just after the famine, in a place called Bog Hill in Kilfenora. And she died in 1911 near Newtown Castle in Ballyvaughan. And when I colorized this picture, it just made it such a much stronger connection to, again, this ancestor who I knew a little about, but had to do some more research into as well. Coincidentally, she's also the great-grandmother of the Irish rugby player Conor Murray, which I found out afterwards. And I think the project, what's been really interesting is that it's helped people to rediscover their own photographic archives. So they've kind of said, oh, I could do something with my own photos. And it's also unearthed boxes of negatives, glass plate negatives, the old negatives that had pretty much lain unused for many years. So that's been a great side effect. The impact, though, of the project on people has just been astounding. And there's been a lot of unintended consequences. And one of those was that in some hospitals, they are using the books in what's called reminiscence therapy, and this is for the elderly. So by helping the elderly to form connections to past memories using these old photographs, it helps them to create better connections to current and present memories. And we've had so many amazing stories of people who have just been withdrawn into themselves and who would never pick up a book, but would pick up a copy of Old Ireland in colour every day and read it, flick through the photographs. It's just been very, very inspiring. And we've had many intergenerational connections, stories of grandparents connecting with their grandchildren over a copy of the book at Christmas or during COVID, again, flicking through the pictures and explaining to their grandchildren what life was like when they were young through the various pictures that they see in the book. It's really been amazing. The amount of work that goes into colorizing some of these photographs can be a little bit mind-boggling. And it can bring you down some real interesting or strange rabbit holes. I'm going to show you a particular picture. It's one of the second Doyle. It's taken from the round room in the Mansion House, fantastic venue. And it's one of 3 photographs taken at a time, and all of the big names in Irish politics are in this picture. You've got, sitting up the front, Collins, De Valera, Griffith, and so on. But it was kind of the little pictures or the little details in the picture that caught my eye and that took a lot of work. And in the background of this picture, you'll see a series of paintings. And I had to find out who are these paintings, who are they? So I eventually figured out that there's names there like Parnell and Daniel O'Connell that you'd recognize, but all the other people, I found out they were actually past Lord Mayors of Dublin. And then behind the paintings is actually a whole series of coats of arms of various Lord Mayors. So I couldn't really just apply any random colours onto the coats of arms. I had to kind of figure out who they were, like who are these family names and what are the coats of arms. So here's a picture in colour. So you can imagine kind of in the background all those paintings, and I actually found each of the paintings and was able to apply the colours to that, and then the various coats of arms in the background, as well as all the people in the front, all those famous people as well. But I think that the colour version connects us very strongly to the people in the photograph, whether they're famous or not famous. One of the big things is it really interweaves their world, the world of the past, with our present world. It makes a much stronger connection between history and the present, and that's one of the big things about the project.
Now, one of the things that I've grappled with as a historian is, what's the point? What's the point in re-examining, recontextualizing all these different events? And I suppose, for me at least, the point is that it has some relevance today. So take, for example, the position of women and how it's changed over the last 150 years, or even just the re-inclusion of women and the acknowledgement of women and what they had done. And I think about a girl holding a placard, Irish Women and the Vote, or then I think of an image of all men drafting the 1922 Constitution, or I think of an image which was poverty that many experienced, and for many of the women, they're the ones who took the brunt of that hardship. And then you start thinking about all the firsts, and we really do think about this in the book and in the books. So the first women to defy so many gender norms. And we also try, and I also try to consider other groups that were marginalised. So members of the Irish travelling community who are still struggling today for acknowledgement, or individuals who are institutionalised. And I suppose what you're trying to do is think about how relevant their stories are still today. And at least when I see their faces in colour, I certainly feel a connectedness that I don't feel in black and white. And and we've talked about this, I almost feel a protectiveness. So I suppose we feel there are millions of photographs in the 19th and 20th century. And these millions of photographs explore and show the diversity of so many lives. And using colorization as a tool, using it as a way to engage more people, we really feel that it is democratizing history. It is creating more empathy. Even as a teaching tool, using one of these photographs has students more engaged than I've seen ever before. So I suppose the question for us is, and for ye, people live their lives in colour. Let's just start with that and see where it leads us. Thank you.
Thank you.